Hey guys, tonight we journey back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile to a civilization known for pyramids, pharaohs, and gods that watched your every move. But behind the gold masks and grand temples lies a much harsher reality. Today, we are asking, what would happen if you lived just one day in ancient Egypt? Because let me tell you, the sun is not the only thing that will roast you alive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let us ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to ancient Egypt, land of pyramids, gods, and relentless ultraviolet violence. Before you even open your eyes, the sun is already blasting through your reed hut, like it is auditioning for the role of unforgiving sky god. There are no curtains, no shades, and certainly no air conditioning. Just the raw, unforgiving heat of the desert, baking everything, including you. By breakfast, you are lying on a straw mat, with a linen sheet that is more suggestion than protection. The Nile breeze, you were promised in all those travel documentaries, yes. It is gone, probably died, sometime around 2800 B.C. By the time you stumble outside, the temperature is already flirting with 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 32 degrees Celsius. And it is not even mid-morning. The sun does not just shine in ancient Egypt. It attacks your linen tunic. Useless. It is like wearing tissue paper in a sauna. And do not even think about sunscreen. There is no aloe vera. No SPF 50. Not even a floppy hat with a logo from a beach resort. Ancient Egyptians did have protective oils. But unless you are wealthy or work in a temple, you are not getting any of it. Your best options smear yourself with mud or crocodile dung, which apparently might keep you from turning into a human torch. Emphasis on might. By midday, the stones under your feet are hot enough to cook lentils. Shade is a luxury. Trees are rare. You might get a little relief hiding behind a mud brick wall. But even that wall is sweating by now. You, on the other hand, I look like someone threw you into a clay oven and forgot to set the timer. And you better not complain. Ra, the sun god, is watching. And in ancient Egypt, the sun was not just weather, it was divine authority. The hotter the day, the more powerful Ra was feeling. So basically, if you are melting, it is a spiritual compliment. In short, surviving one day in ancient Egypt requires hydration, humility, and an ironclad tolerance for feeling like a roast chicken. And this is just the morning. You are finally out of bed. Or rather, off your scratchy straw mat. And the good news is, the Nile is just a short walk away. The bad news, you can already smell it before you see it. Yes, the mighty Nile, the life-giver of ancient Egypt, revered as sacred. The reason civilization here even exists. But let us be honest, it also smells like a fish market, had a bad breakup with a swamp. The banks are buzzing with flies, frogs, and things that probably should not have legs, but do. Still, this is where you bathe. Soap has not been invented yet, and even if it had, you could not afford it. Instead, you lather yourself in the freshest cleansing technology of the day. Sand. That is right. Exfoliation. The Egyptian way. Just rub yourself down with coarse grains and call it skincare. It is like nature's sandpaper. But less effective. Washing clothes is also done in the Nile. And by washing, we mean pounding them against rocks while praying that a crocodile does not mistake your laundry for a tasty midday snack. Oh, and just to make things more fun, let us not forget the occasional sewage runoff from upstream. Remember, people, livestock, and the occasional funeral boat all share this river. And yet, somehow this is considered clean. You scrub, rinse, and emerge feeling slightly less sticky and only moderately more worried about leeches. If you are a city dweller in Memphis or Thebes, you might be lucky enough to use a public basin or cistern, but for everyone else, it is Nile or nothing, and do not expect privacy. This is a public bathing space shared by families, neighbors, livestock, and the odd ibis pecking around your ankles like it pays rent. Water jars are filled and balanced on heads, carried back to your mud brick house before the midday heat turns clay into toast. It is a daily ritual, spiritual, necessary, and slightly traumatic. So, yes, the Nile is sacred. It feeds you, cleans you, and quenches your thirst. But let us not pretend it is a sparkling oasis. In reality, it is part miracle, part biohazard, and all you have got. By now, you have bathed in the crocodile-infested Nile. You have sandpapered yourself, semi-clean, and your body feels like a baked fig. Time for breakfast, the most important and least glamorous meal of your ancient Egyptian day. Let us set expectations. There are no eggs, Benedict, no fruit bowls, and absolutely no iced lattes. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is less of a culinary event and more a tactical refueling operation. You sit on a low stool if you have one, or just squat in the corner like everyone else. The centerpiece of your meal bread, lots of it, denser, coarse, and often as chewy as a leather sandal. It is made from emmer wheat or barley and baked in clay ovens that may or may not be shared by the local rats. And do not be surprised if there is sand in your slice. Not as a topping, just an uninvited ingredient from the grinding stones. A daily dose of minerals. You could say, then comes the beer. But do not get excited. This is not crisp, bubbly craft ale. This is thick, cloudy, lukewarm, liquid bread, more porridge than pint. It is packed with calories and vaguely fermented. A medieval smoothie with the faint taste of sour cereal and survival. Even children drink it, not to be edgy, but because it is safer than water. At least the brewing process boils out parasites. Unlike the Nile, which we just discussed, is basically a petri dish. If you are lucky, and we mean very lucky, you might get an onion or a few dried dates to go with your carbon foam combo. Protein only if someone caught a fish and did not immediately eat it raw. And as you chew your rock-like loaf and sip your grain sludge, flies buzz around you like it is a buffet. Because it is. For them, you swat at them with one hand, hold your cup with the other, and try not to think too hard about the fact that this is likely the best meal you will have today. Breakfast in ancient Egypt is not about flavor. It is function. It fuels your body just enough to survive until the next time someone hands you another sand-infused brick of bread. Bon appetit. You have had your gritty bread, your chunky beer, and just enough rest to call yourself functional. Now it is time to work, and trust me, ancient Egyptian labor makes modern burnout look like a spa day. Unless you are a scribe, priest, or royalty, which, let us be honest, you are not. Your job is pure muscle and dust. No air-conditioned cubicle, no coffee breaks, no ergonomic chairs, just sweat, sand, and a constant risk of collapsing before noon. If you are a farmer, you will be ankle-deep in Nile, mud by sunrise, yanking wheats, or planting barley under the eye of an overseer whose hobby seems to be yelling. You use wooden plows, crude sickles, and your bare hands. If your back hurts, congratulations. That means it is working. If you are a laborer, things get even more biblical. Imagine hauling multi-ton stones for temple construction under a blazing sun while barefoot up ramps made of gravel and prayer. There is no OSHA here. You trip. That is a broken ankle and shrug from the foreman. Working on tombs, that is another level of grind. You are hammering limestone, chiseling out burial chambers for people who will get to rest longer than you ever will. And if you mess up a pharaoh's tomb, let us just say, job security might involve a sealed chamber and a curse. And if you are a woman, you are not off the hook. Domestic work is also physical labor, grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, caring for children, and still helping in the fields. Your break is when the baby naps for 7 minutes, while you prepare dinner, eat on the go. You wipe sweat with your tunic. You keep moving because slowing down means falling behind. And behind means someone else gets your grain quota, and you get the blame. There is no clocking out. The sun is your supervisor. When it finally sinks behind the horizon, you crawl home, half alive, dust-caked, and dreaming of softer sandals and a less aggressive sun god. Work in ancient Egypt is not just hard, it is endless. It is a full-body commitment to survival day after day until your body gives out or your overseer decides you are not worth feeding. And that is not even the worst of it. After sweating your soul out in the fields or quarry, you might be tempted to grumble, maybe something small. A little, this job stinks. Or why am I doing this again? Stop right there. Because in ancient Egypt, complaining is not just frowned upon. It is potentially treason. Why? Because your boss is not just a ruler. He is a literal god. The pharaoh is not some guy who got elected or born into a lucky family. He is the human embodiment of Horus, son of Ra, chosen by the heavens to rule over Egypt and keep Ma'at, divine cosmic order, intact. In other words, if the river floods well this year, thank the pharaoh. If it does not, well, maybe you did not pray hard enough. Questioning his authority is not just rude. It is blasphemy. Speaking ill of him could land you a date with a whip, set of shackles, or an early trip to the underworld with none of your favorite burial goods. You see his face everywhere, on statues, temple walls, coins, even bread molds. His name is chanted in rituals. His image is painted larger than everyone else's in every mural. That is not artistic exaggeration. That is law. And do not expect to ever see him. If you are a commoner, the closest you will get is watching a golden bark float by during a religious festival. Blink, and he is gone, back to a palace you will never enter, surrounded by officials, guards, scribes, and enough gold to finance a small civilization, which, a fun fact, he basically does. If you are lucky enough to work on a royal project, say a tomb, temple, or statue the size of a mountain, you serve with divine joy. At least that is what the state says. You say it. 2. Because pretending you are honored to carve stone for 14 hours a day is safer than the alternative. And do not even think about rebellion. Pharaohs crush uprisings faster than you can say dynasty. Just ask the last village that tried to withhold taxes. Oh, wait, you cannot. It no longer exists. So, yes, the Pharaoh is divine, and you are just lucky to be allowed to sweat in his name. Now, get back to work. If you thought surviving under the sun was hard, just wait until you realize that in ancient Egypt, sand is your roommate, co-worker, seasoning, and mortal enemy. It is everywhere, in your clothes, in bed, in your food. There is no escaping it. You could be working, praying, sleeping, or minding your own business in the market. And suddenly, a gust of hot wind sweeps by and turns your face into a grainy exfoliation experiment you did not ask for. Let us start with the clothes. You wear linen. It is light, breathable, and about as effective at keeping sand out as a screen door is at holding back soup. It slides down your tunic, clings to your skin, and somehow finds its way into places you did not know had creases. Eating, good luck. Every loaf of bread is basically a sand trap, since flour was ground between stone slabs. Little bits of grit made their way into the dough. Egyptians did not just eat their wheat, they ate their millstones. 2. It is why ancient dental remains are often worn flat like river rocks. Imagine chewing your breakfast while also filing your molars daily. And if you thought your house was a sand-free zone, I think again. Your mud brick home has gaps, crevices, and windows with no glass. Perfect portals for wind-blown sand. Your floors are covered. Your cooking pots are full. Your bed is basically a sand pit disguised as furniture. Shoes optionelle at best. Most Egyptians walked barefoot, meaning you are always one step away from turning your feet into battered leather sandals. If you do have footwear, it is usually a basic pair of sandals made from reeds. Fashionable, perhaps. Protective, not remotely. Then there are sandstorms, Egypt's version of a slap from the gods. Sudden, zwirling, blinding. One moment you are talking to a friend. The next, you are spitting dust and feeling like someone dumped an entire beach into your eye sockets. Visibility drops to 0, and everyone around you turns into vaguely coughing silhouettes. In short, sand is the roommate who never leaves, the spice in every meal, and the silent enemy of your eyes. Lungs and dignity. It is not just the backdrop of your life. It is part of your body now. And no, you cannot wash it off. You already tried in the Nile, which is probably full of more sand. In ancient Egypt, religion is not just a weekend activity. It is the operating system for everything. Your job, your diet, hygiene routine, your bedtime rituals, all dictated by gods who seem to have very specific opinions. First, understand this. The gods are everywhere. Your town has temples to a dozen different deities, each responsible for some vital function. There is Ra, who pilots the sun across the sky like it is a divine Uber. Thoth, beaked god of wisdom, is in charge of scribes and moon calendars. Zobek, part crocodile, nightmare fuel, guards the Nile. And Bastet, cart goddess, basically runs public relations. Forget personal freedom. Your daily routine revolves around pleasing them. Wake up. Thank Ra. Spill some beer. Apologize to Hathor. Stubiarto. Curse quietly. Or risk attracting a spirit with a grudge. Before meals, you offer a bit of food to the gods. Before bed, you pray that Set, god of chaos, does not toss your house into existential disarray overnight. Even funerals are multi-day affairs where the deceased must pass tests. Avoid demons, and prove they were morally decent, or risk eternal erasure. Speaking of the afterlife, ancient Egyptians took it very seriously. You do not just die and move on. You must pass a judgment process involving your heart, being weighed against a feather of truth. If your heart is heavier because of lies, cruelty, or maybe stealing someone's goat, you are eaten by Amit, a creature with the head of a crocodile, body of a lion, and the legs of your worst nightmare. So yes, even in death, you are still on probation. But here is the twist. This complex belief system is not depressing. It is comforting. Egyptians believed life was part of a cosmic balance, and if you followed the rituals and upheld Ma'at, the principle of truth and order, you had a chance at peaceful eternity, complete with food, family, and maybe a boat. Of course, the richer you were, the more gods seemed to notice you. Temples were massive, priests powerful, and peasants, well, they just hoped the gods were feeling generous that day. Because in ancient Egypt, faith is not optional. It is your job description, insurance plan, and your travel itinerary for the next life. So, you have stepped on something sharp, got bit by something weird, or caught something contagious, which, in ancient Egypt, is basically Tuesday. Time to seek medical care. Just do not expect a waiting room or a sterile environment. You are about to be healed with a combination of spells, herbs, and sheer optimism. First, you will be taken to a doctor, and to be fair, they were some of the most advanced in the ancient world. They had surgical tools, medical texts, and a decent understanding of anatomy. But here is the catch. Science, in ancient Egypt, always came with a heavy dose of magic. You are given a poultice made of honey, moldy bread, and crushed herbs. Honey, actually, is antibacterial, and mold has early penicillin properties. So it works. Sort of. But before applying it, the healer will chant a protective spell just to be safe, because you never know when your stomach cramps are actually the result of a spiteful ghost or an angry god. Have a headache. You might get a dose of crushed onions rubbed into your scalp while someone recites a hymn. Chest infection. Let us smear cow dung mixed with dates on your chest and see what happens. Eye infection. Time for a paste of lizard blood. Oche. And beer. Plus a prayer to Horus. Surgery. It did happen sometimes. Abscesses were drained. Bones were set. And wounds were stitched with linen thread. But there is no anesthesia. Just a sharp knife and a friend to hold your shoulders down while you scream into a mud brick pillow. Dentistry. Not great. Remember all that sand in the bread. Your teeth are worn down by your 20s. If one gets infected, your options are 1. Live with it. 2. Die from it. Or 3. Have it pulled with something resembling pliers made by a blacksmith with low standards. And let us not forget the amulets. Whether you are giving birth, getting stitched up, or just sneezing too loud. A good doctor or priest will probably hang a charm around your neck, just in case the real issue is an invisible serpent spirit curled around your spleen. So, yes, Egyptian medicine had its moments. But mostly, you had better believe in the gods because your band-aid is literally a prayer. Here is a plot twist most people do not expect. Ancient Egyptian women had more rights than many women in later civilizations. They could own property, or run business, file for divorce, and even take a man to court. Sounds progressive, right? But before you pack your bags for a time-traveling girl boss vacation, hold up, because while the legal status might impress you, the day-to-day reality is not so glamorous. If you are a woman in ancient Egypt, you probably wake up before sunrise. You are grinding grain by hand, using a giant flat stone that chews through both wheat and your spine. Then, it is off to haul water from the Nile, cook breakfast, care for children, manage the household, feed animals, and if needed, help in the fields. You are a one-woman workforce. In linen, there is no me time, spades, and definitely no maternity leave. Childbirth is risky and painful. Midwives are helpful, I'm sure, but there are no epidurals, no disinfectant, and no push playlists featuring relaxing harps. You give birth in a hot room with incense, prayers, and hopefully not too much bleeding. Let us talk fashion. Linen dresses are light and breathable, but there is no underwear and no shoes. The sun scorches your skin. The sand grinds into everything, and the bugs think you are an all-you-can-eat buffet. Want makeup great. Egyptian women did wear cosmetics, but it is lead-based and applied with sticks that look suspiciously like toothpicks. Now, if you are lucky enough to be born into a wealthy family, things are better. You might read, write, manage estate accounts, or become a priestess. If you are born royal, you could even become pharaoh like Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, who ruled with brilliance and terrifying eyeliner. But if you are poor, your status may be legal, but your reality is physical. You work, sweat, und bent, carry, birth, bury, and pray. You are not chained by law, but by survival. Still, Egyptian women had agency, and that mattered. They could speak in court, keep their inheritance, and did not become property when they married. Compared to many ancient societies, that is huge. So, yes, Egyptian women had rights, but comfort, that is reserved for statues and goddesses, not the woman elbow deep in dough, while swatting flies off a toddler. You made it through another grueling day in ancient Egypt. You ate your gritty bread, hauled your buckets, avoided divine wrath, and maybe even dodged a sandstorm. Time to relax. Right, wrong, because in ancient Egypt, your real test begins after you die. Death is not the end. It is just the beginning of an incredibly bureaucratic, multi-phase journey through the underworld. And if you thought the labor overseer was strict, wait until you meet the gods of judgment. First, your soul takes a trip to the Hall of Ma'at. Here, before a tribunal of 42 deities, you must proclaim your innocence in what is basically the oldest legal deposition in history. You say things like, I did not steal, I did not lie, I did not covet my neighbor's donkey, all while hoping the gods buy it. Then comes the heart test. Literally, your heart, believed to be the seat of soul, is placed on a scale opposite the feather of Ma'at, symbol of truth, justice, and balance. If your heart is heavier than the feather, well, that means you have lived a wicked life. Enter Amit, part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, all terrifying. She does not arrest you. She finds you. She eats your soul, destroying it forever. No afterlife. No second chances. Just eternal non-existence, which in a culture obsessed with eternity is the ultimate punishment. And it gets better. You can doom yourself not just by actions, but words. One wrong confession, one forgotten line during your judgment, and boom, spiritual obliteration. It is like an open book test, where failure means getting devoured by a mythological death hybrid. If you do pass, congratulations. You get to enter the field of reeds, a peaceful, idealized version of Egypt where your soul lives forever with boats, crops, family, and presumably with fewer sand fleas. But the stakes are enormous. That is why Egyptians obsessed over tomb preparation, funeral rites, and magical texts like the Book of the Dead, a spiritual cheat sheet full of prayers, spells, and helpful tips like do not insult the crocodile god. So, yes, afterlife might be beautiful, but only if you live your life very carefully. One curse word, one unpaid temple tax, and your next stop is lunch for Amit. Sleep tight. If there is one small mercy in ancient Egypt, it is this linen, blessed, breathable linen. Your entire wardrobe and everyone else's is made from this plant-based fabric. It is light, cool, and lets your skin breathe in the scorching heat. That is good news. The bad news, that is pretty much where the comfort ends. Whether you are a farmer, builder, priest, or vendor, you are wearing the same outfit every day. For men, a short white kilt or loincloth. For women, a straight sleeveless linen dress, sometimes held up by straps, sometimes not. If you are upper class, you might have pleats, or beads, or fancy patterns. If you are not, it is plain white, or slightly greyish, depending on how long it has been since laundry day. Oh, and laundry day. You are hand scrubbing your clothes in the Nile, while hoping a hippo does not emerge mid-rinse. Most people go barefoot. Sandals made from woven reeds or leather are reserved for special occasions or temple priests. So, unless you are royalty, expect to spend your days with hot sand between your toes and possibly a sharp rock in your heel. Accessories, absolutely, but mostly functional. Amulets for protection, necklaces to show status, and eye makeup made from powdered coal, which was not just for fashion. It helped reduce glare from the sun and supposedly warded off infections. Yes, even eyeliner had a job in ancient Egypt. But no matter how well you dress, the bugs do not care. Flies, gnats, mosquitoes. They treat your airy outfit as an invitation. You are walking through the day, swatting constantly, rubbing on perfumed oils, and praying that your linen does not stick to you like a wet curtain the moment the sun reaches full strength. And of course, your outfit does not change with the seasons, because Egypt does not really have seasons. Just hot and slightly less hot. So, your linen ensemble is basically your year-round uniform, whether it is 110 degrees or a chilly 70 degrees evening. So, yes, Egyptian clothing was light, elegant, and far more comfortable than what Romans would wear later. But do not let the breezy outfits fool you, because no matter how floaty your tunic feels, life is still heavy with labor, heat, sand, and bugs that refuse to respect your personal space. You have survived another blistering Egyptian day, howling bricks, dodging sandstorms, and praying your linen does not disintegrate mid-task. But in ancient Egypt, survival is always temporary, because no matter how tough you are, you probably will not live past 35. Let us break it down. If you make it past childhood, which is already an achievement, considering infant mortality rates were sky high, you are thrust straight into adulthood by age 13. Marriage, work, and child rearing all start early, because honestly, you are running out of time. You might die from heat stroke or an infected cut, childbirth or crocodiles, scorpion stings or bad bread, and forget antibiotics. If you get a fever, the best treatment is honey, herbs, and hoping the gods do not have other plans for your soul. But here is the twist. Egyptians were not scared of death. They planned for it. In fact, they planned for it better than most people plan for retirement today. If you are rich, you commission a tomb, the ancient version of a 5-star eternity suite. You start saving up grave goods, jewelry, food offerings, perfumes, statues, even tiny servant dolls called shaptis to do your chores in the afterlife. Think of them as spiritual interns who work while you nap forever. Your body is embalmed, wrapped in linen, stuffed with natron, natural salt, and tucked neatly into a painted sarcophagus. You are buried with a copy of the Book of the Dead, which is less about doom and more like a mystical travel guide, complete with passwords for the afterlife, spells to confuse demons, and instructions for not getting eaten by soul-devouring monsters. If you are poor, well, your tomb is likely a shallow pit in the sand. Your body is wrapped in whatever fabric your family can spare, maybe a pot or two placed nearby, and then covered with earth. No murals, no golden mask, just you and the wind. But even the poorest Egyptians held on to the dream of afterlife. A peaceful, fertile paradise called the Field of Reeds, where you farm without sweat, eat without hunger, and sail the Nile forever under gentle sunlight. So yes, you will probably die young in ancient Egypt, but if you lived well, prayed right, and did not insult too many jackal-headed gods, you just might spend eternity in style. You finally made it to the afterlife, or at least into the tomb. You have been embalmed, wrapped, blessed, and buried. Time to rest in peace. Right? Well, not exactly, because in ancient Egypt, even the dead get robbed. Let us start with a simple truth. Tombs are full of expensive stuff, gold amulets, jewelry, perfumed oils, carved statues, chests full of linens, and for pharaohs, literal boatloads of treasure, all intended to be taken into the afterlife. But treasure in a tomb is basically an open invitation for someone with a chisel and bad intentions. Tomb robbery was so common that it became a full-time problem. Pharaohs tried to fight it by hiding their tombs deep in cliffs, locking them behind trapdoors, and scrawling terrifying curses on the walls. Things like, "May a crocodile devour your soul," or May your limbs be twisted forever by a serpent made of fire. Spoiler: the curses did not work. Grave robbers came anyway at night, in secret, with inside knowledge. Sometimes they were locals. Sometimes they were corrupt workers who helped build the tombs. In some cases, even priests and guards were in on it. And the punishment for getting caught was severe. Think public beatings, mutilation, exile, or death. But considering how valuable tomb goods were, especially gold and rare incense, the risk often seemed worth it. After all, the dead do not fight back. But it is not just the wealthy who got robbed. Even commoners' graves were disturbed. Poorer Egyptians might have been buried with a small pot of beer or loaf of bread for the afterlife. That was still worth stealing. Food was scarce. Tools were valuable. And linen was currency. The irony: tomb robbing was not just about greed. Sometimes it was about survival. Egypt went through famines, political collapse, and invasions. A hungry worker might break into a tomb, not for treasure, but food. And when your children are starving, a few funeral offerings look less like sacred objects and more like dinner. So in ancient Egypt, you are not safe just because you are dead. Your tomb can be looted, your name erased, and your mummy unwrapped by some desperate soul with a pickaxe and poor moral judgment. Rest in peace, only if no one knows where you are buried. We have all seen them, those majestats, mysterious carvings on the walls of temples and tombs, birds, eyes, snakes, lotus flowers, men walking sideways like they are on a fashion runway, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, visually stunning and insanely difficult to learn. Sure, they look cool, but try reading them. Hieroglyphs were not just decorative art. They were a full-blown writing system with over 700 characters and growing. Some symbols represent entire words. Others are sounds and many determinatives, which clarify meaning. Because, writing the word star with an actual star symbol might be too straightforward. And do not expect spaces or punctuation. Ancient Egyptian writing was basically one long, beautiful riddle with artistic flair, zero vowels, and a deep need for context. Oh, and it can be written left to right to left, or top to bottom, depending on what the scribe felt like that day. The trick: look at which way the birds or people are facing. That is your reading direction. If they are facing right, read right. Facing left, read left. And if they are upside down, good luck. Learning to write hieroglyphs was not for commoners. Literacy was rare. Maybe 1% of the population could actually read and write. If you wanted in, you had to become a scribe, which meant years of intense education. Starting as a child, you would memorize hundreds of symbols, copy endless scrolls, and practice so much that your hand probably curled into a claw by age 15. But the payoff huge. Scribes were respected, well-paid, and never made to haul bricks under the sun. Instead, they wrote tax records, cours documents, letters, and religious texts. They were essential to society and protected from most manual labor. In a world where writing was power, scribes ruled quietly from the shadows. For the rest of the population, though, writing was something magical. Literally, hieroglyphs were believed to have sacred power. Writing someone's name preserved their soul. Erasing it, total, spiritual annihilation. So, yes, Spelling really mattered. So, while hieroglyphs may look like ancient emoji, they are more like a linguistic Rubik's Cube wrapped in myth, math, and mystery. Beautiful, yes. Easy to learn, absolutely not. After 14 chapters of heat, hunger, sand, Superstition, and backbreaking labor, it is time to ask the big question. Would you survive a single day in ancient Egypt? Let us be honest. Probably not. Sure, it is easy to romanticize the ancient world, golden tombs, lotus-scented air, graceful hieroglyphs, gods with animal heads, and a thing for order and beauty. But behind the iconic monuments and stunning art was a world of brutal realities that spared no one but the elite. Your average Egyptian day started with a dirt floor, a cloud of flies, and the knowledge that if you did not work, you did not eat. You walked barefoot on blazing sand, hauled water, cooked over open fires, lived shoulder to shoulder with bugs, smoke, and livestock. You worried about disease, divine punishment, and whether a snake might slither into your sleeping mat. You had no toothpaste, no medicina, no retirement plan, and if you were lucky, maybe 2 changes of linen. You served a god king who could take your land with a decree, a climate that cooked your skin by noon, and a religion that required you to pass a literal divine test after death, just to get into the good version of the afterlife. Let us also not forget the things you did not have. No antibiotics, no sunscreen, no privacy, no plumbing, no painkillers, and no easy escape. Once you were born into your class, that was it. No promotions, no career changes, no finding yourself. You were either a scribe, farmer, laborer, a mother, servant, or dead. And yet, for all this, the ancient Egyptians were not miserable. They believed deeply in their gods, purpose, and the beauty of life. They loved music, dance, food, family, and festivals. They joked, they painted, they imagined eternity with enough clarity to build stone monuments that still stand today. But for a modern person, without your air conditioning, your filtered water, your Advil, your sneakers, and smartphone, you would fold before the second sandstorm hit. So, no, you would not last a day in ancient Egypt. But that is okay, because they lasted thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, that is why we still talk about them. In the heart of ancient Teotihuacan, one pyramid refuses to be forgotten. Its surface is adorned, not with peaceful symbols of faith or gentle gods, but with snarling open-mouthed stone serpents. Dozens of them. They jut out from the temple's facade, as if frozen in mid-strike. Fangsbaret, eyes wide. This is the temple of the feathered serpent, known to many as the temple of Quetzalcoatl. But unlike most temples that reach for the sky with reverence, this one feels different. It feels predatory. From the moment you approach it, there is an eerie sense that you are being watched. The stone serpent heads are not mere decoration. They were warnings, symbols of divine wrath, and beneath their gaze, something horrific once unfolded. Excavations over the past few decades have revealed something that archaeologists did not expect. Hidden beneath the temple's base were not just ceremonial offerings, but something far more disturbing: human remains, and not a handful, over 200 bodies, many of them decapitated, hands bound behind their backs, young men, warriors perhaps, buried in groups, ritual sacrifices arranged with mathematical precision. Some were buried with obsidian knives at their sides, others with necklaces made of human teeth or jewelry crafted from jawbones. They were not simply thrown into the ground. They were deliberately placed in positions of symbolic significance. It is clear this was no mass grave. It was a message, a divine transaction carved into stone and sealed with blood. But what kind of belief system justifies such horror, who demanded so many lives be taken at once? The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not just a religious building. It was a theater of power, a place where rulers fused cosmology, warfare, and fear to maintain control over a city of more than 100,000 souls. And this ritual bloodletting may have been the cost of keeping the cosmos in balance. As you stand before this temple today, gazing at those stone serpents, you are not just looking at art or architecture. You are looking into the eyes of a civilization that believed the gods needed blood and that they had every right to deliver it. But who were these people, who commanded such violence and vanished without a trace? The answer lies in the shadows of Teotihuacan. Before the mighty Aztec Empire, before the Maya carved their cosmic calendar into stone, there stood a city, unlike any other in the ancient Americas, Teotihuacan. Its name, given by the later Aztecs, means the place where gods were born. And, when you walk its immense avenue of the dead, flanked by pyramids that scrape the heavens, you start to understand why. At its height, around 100 to 250 c.A., Teotihuacan was a sprawling metropolis of over 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at the time, rivaling ancient Rome, Alexandria, and Chang'an in size and influence. It was a city meticulously planned wide boulevards, gridded streets, apartment compounds, housing extended families, multi-story structures made from volcanic stone, and at the center of it all, 3 massive pyramids: the Pyramid of the Moon, Pyramid of the Sun, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. But here is what makes Teotihuacan different. No one knows who built it. Seriously. To this day, we do not know the name of the people who constructed this place. We do not even know what they called themselves. There are no written records, no kings' names carved into stone. Teotihuacan seems to have been a society ruled not by a single monarch but perhaps by a council, a theocracy, or something altogether foreign to our understanding of ancient power. And despite this anonymity, their influence was colossal. Evidence of Teotihuacan's power has been found hundreds of miles away, from the Maya cities of Tikal and Copan to the distant Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. Obsidian blades, ceramic styles, murals, and even political meddling. In one case, Teotihuacan emissaries may have helped overthrow a local Maya king to install a ruler more favorable to their interests. But how did they maintain such a vast network? How did a city with no known writing system command such authority across Mesoamerica? The answer may lie in how they combined cosmic ideology with statecraft. Their temples were more than places of worship. They were tools of control, aligning perfectly with astronomical events, serving as theaters of ritual sacrifice, and reminding every citizen and every visitor that Teotihuacan was no ordinary city. It was the axis of the world, a sacred engine that kept time, fate, and blood flowing in sync. And at the heart of it all stood the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. To understand the temple, you must first understand the deity it was dedicated to, the feathered serpent. Known later by the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl and to the Maya as Kukulkan. This figure is one of the most enigmatic gods in all of Mesoamerican mythology. But in Teotihuacan, centuries before the Aztecs rose to power, the feathered serpent was already a central, possibly supreme, divina force. But here is the paradox. What kind of god is both a serpent and a bird? Think about that. Serpents slither through the underworld. They shed their skin, symbolizing rebirth, duality, and death. Birds soar high in the sky, closer to the sun, representing freedom, divinity, and life-giving wind. To combine these two, earthbound and sky-dwelling, death and life, chaos and order, was to create something entirely cosmic, something terrifyingly powerful. The feathered serpent was not just a god. He was a bridge between worlds. On the facade of the temple, carved in deep relief, we see dozens of his images: goggle eyes, bared teeth, plumed headdresses. Some historians believe these represent the god himself. Others suggest they are warriors or priestly figures adorned in divine regalia to signal their authority. Either way, they are everywhere. The temple is covered in these snake-bird hybrids, as if the structure itself breathes with divine presence. But the feathered serpent was not just a god of the heavens. He was intimately tied to sacrifice. Blood was the fuel that kept the cosmos in motion. And Quetzalcoatl, though later remembered as a gentle, civilizing deity, had a much darker role in Teotihuacan. He demanded offerings, and not just of maize or incense, but life itself. In some myths, he descended into the underworld to retrieve the bones of the dead and create humankind. But to bring life from death, there had to be a trade. The gods sacrificed themselves for humanity, and humans in return were expected to do the same. The temple of the feathered serpent was not just a monument to faith. It was a cosmic engine designed to link the sky, the earth, and underworld through ritual. Every stone, every serpent head, every buried victim fed into that system. Teotihuacan did not just worship the feathered serpent. They embodied his logic, paradox, power, and blood, and the most disturbing truths were hidden beneath the surface. For centuries, the temple of the feathered serpent stood silently, a weathered, imposing structure, half swallowed by time. Locals whispered, legends, scholars made guesses, but no one could have imagined what was buried beneath its layered stones until archaeologists broke through in the late 1980s and early 2000s. What they found was not just unexpected, it was unsettling. Hidden beneath the temple's foundations were a series of long-sealed chambers and pits, each filled with carefully arranged human remains. These were not the messy results of war or disease. These were deliberate sacrifices, systematic, ritualistic, cold. The victims, numbering over 200, were young men, many between 15 and 25. Some wore necklaces made of human jawbones. Others had their hands tied behind their backs. A few were decapitated. Obsidian knives, sharp and black as night, were scattered nearby, the unmistakable tools of ritual slaughter. And this is where it gets darker. The arrangement of the bodies followed geometric and symbolic patterns. They were not buried randomly. They were placed in quadrants, cardinal directions, possibly to mirror the cosmos. Even the number of bodies mattered. It was not just about death. It was about meaningful death. Offerings surrounded the victims. Kawar bonus. Serpents. Exotic shells from the distant Gulf Coast. Figurines. And obsidian blades that had never been used in battle. This was not punishment. It was a gift. These young men, most likely warriors, had been selected not to die in disgrace, but to die as part of something transcendent. To the Teotihuacanos, the very act of building a temple may have required human sacrifice. It was as if every stone had to be consecrated with blood, every layer raised only after an offering had been made. The deeper you dig, the more sacrifice you find. In one chamber, archaeologists discovered elaborate tunnels filled with mercury and mica, materials associated with the underworld. The floor glimmered like water. Was this a symbolic passage to the land of the dead, a mirror of the night sky? The more they excavated, the more it felt like the temple was not built on top of death, but constructed to encase it. The blood did not stain the stone by accident. The stone was meant to hold the blood, and all of it was for the gods. Look closer at the temple of the feathered serpent, and you will notice something strange, something unnerving. It does not just sit on the landscape. It aligns with the universe. Teotihuacan was not built randomly. The entire city was laid out along precise cosmic axes. Its central avenue of the dead runs at a 15-degree angle off true north. Not a mistake, but a deliberate shift, possibly to align with the setting of the Pleiades star cluster or the sun on specific ritual dates. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent sits directly along this avenue, locking it into a grand celestial blueprint. But why? What were they trying to align with? Archaeologists and archaeoastronomers have debated this for decades. Some suggest the temple lines up with the equinox sunrise. Others argue it connects to Venus, the planet most sacred to Mesoamerican civilizations, often associated with war, sacrifice, and rebirth. When Venus rose or set, wars were declared, offerings made, and temples activated with ritual fire. Even the temple's dimensions seem intentional. The repetition of the number 7, the number of visible planetary bodies, to appears in its step platforms. There is symmetry, rhythm, and a stunning understanding of both earthly math and cosmic cycles. And beneath the surface, more clues. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered a tunnel beneath the temple, not a crude passage, but a deliberately constructed subterranean world. The walls were once covered in powdered pyrite, a shimmering mineral that would have reflected light like starlight, combined with mercury pools and mica-lined walls. The tunnel seemed designed to replicate the cosmos itself. To walk through it would be like traveling through the Milky Way, a symbolic journey to the underworld, or perhaps to rebirth. Was this temple not just a place of sacrifice, but a cosmic machine, a portal that aligned earth, sky, and the spirit realm? Some scholars believe Teotihuacan saw time as circular, not linear. Every ritual, every building, every sacrifice was not a one-time event. It was part of an eternal cycle, death leading to renewal, sacrifice fueling rebirth. The temple's alignments may have helped predict celestial movements, coordinate harvests, and more importantly, time when to offer blood. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not just looking at the stars, it was trying to speak to them. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not just a spiritual beacon, it was a political weapon. Its very design was meant to overwhelm, intimidate, to remind every viewer, local or foreign, who held the reins of power in Teotihuacan. Imagine standing in its shadow 1,800 years ago. You, a visitor from a smaller city-state, would arrive at the Avenue of the Dead, already awestruck by the sheer scale of Teotihuacan. But when you reach the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, you would freeze. The serpent heads stare at you, their fangs bared. Jaguar symbols growl from the stone. The plaza ahead once held massive gatherings, not just for celebration, but for public ritual. You might even witness a sacrifice. The ruling elite of Teotihuacan understood something crucial. Fear is power, and nothing stirs fear like divine wrath. By orchestrating ritual executions in broad daylight, surrounded by cosmic symbols and death imagery, they sent a clear message. The gods are with us, and we are not afraid to feed them. But this was not chaos. This was theater. Priests in feathered headdresses and obsidian masks would chant, dance, and spill blood, turning cosmic myth into political performance. It was not just about pleasing the gods. It was about reminding everyone watching that the city's rulers had direct access to the divine. They alone could open the heavens or summon rain, protect the people, or destroy their enemies. Even the architecture helped reinforce this propaganda. From the temple's upper tiers, leaders could look down upon the plaza. They controlled not just the narrative, but the very physical space in which it unfolded. The people looked up at the gods, rulers, sacrifices, and knew their place. And for outsiders, Teotihuacan did not need to conquer with swords. It conquered with symbols. Visiting dignitaries would carry home tales of awe and terror. They would speak of the feathered serpents, the endless avenues, the blood rituals that lit the sky red. In a world where gods ruled through fear, Teotihuacan positioned itself as their chosen mouthpiece, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was the loudest voice of all. At its peak, Teotihuacan was the heartbeat of Mesoamerica, a city of fire and stone, of gods and blood, a city that seemed destined to last forever. But around the year 550 CE, something changed, something broke, and the silence that followed was as chilling as the temple's stone serpent heads. The fall of Teotihuacan was not loud and glorious. It was gradual, then sudden. Signs of strain began appearing decades earlier, signs that the cosmic engine was faltering. Evidence points to a long period of drought, crop failure, and social unrest. The very systems that had sustained this grand city centralized power, religious dominance. Cosmic order began to crack under pressure. And then came the fire. Archaeologists have uncovered widespread burn layers across elite compounds, temples, and administrative buildings, including signs of violent destruction at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. What is strange is that the lower-class residential areas were mostly untouched. This was not an external invasion. This was an uprising, a rebellion, possibly from within. The very people who once watched sacrifices in awe may have risen against their priest kings. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, once a symbol of divine authority, was ransacked. Sculptures were defaced, fires were set, ritual spaces desecrated, and then silence. Teotihuacan was not completely abandoned overnight, but it lost its soul. Trade networks collapsed, artistic productions ceased, the great rituals stopped, the ruling elite disappeared, the temple no longer spoke, and yet the mystery only deepened. because while the city faded, its memory endured. Century later, the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico and stumbled upon its ruins. They were awestruck. They believed gods had built this place. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. They built their own myths around its pyramids, revering it as sacred ground, even as they had no idea who its original builders were. To them, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent was not a ruin. It was a relic of divine truth. But the irony remains, the most powerful city of its time, built on cosmic order and blood, vanished without a written word, without a final record, leaving behind only stone and questions. The gods, it seemed, had gone quiet. For over 1,000 years, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent lay buried beneath layers of dust, volcanic ash, and silence. Locals avoided it. Farmers tilled around it, and the world forgot until the modern age of archaeology arrived and cracked open the secrets buried within its heart. In the early 20th century, Mexican archaeologists began excavating Teotihuacan. What they found was astonishing: a perfectly engineered city, far older than the Aztecs. But it was not until the 1980s and 2000s that the temple itself began to yield its most intimate and chilling revelations. One of the most dramatic discoveries came in 2011, when researchers uncovered a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. It had been deliberately closed off nearly 1,800 years earlier, as if to prevent anyone from entering ever again. After years of excavation, scientists unearthed a cosmic corridor, a symbolic underworld lined with pyrite to mimic a starlit sky, pools of liquid mercury, and thousands of ritual objects: jade statues, rubber bowls, obsidian blades, and even carved wooden masks. It felt less like a tomb and more like a message. Why would the ancient builders go to such lengths? What were they trying to preserve or hide? Some experts believe the tunnel was used in initiation rituals. Others suggest it symbolized the creation of the world, a mythological womb where gods were born, where kings were made, where divine order was negotiated between humans and the cosmos. The mercury, once thought to be only toxic, may have represented water, or the fluid veil between worlds. And among all these glittering fragments was one persistent whisper. The feathered serpent still lingered, not just as a myth, but a presence in murals, carvings, the geometry of the temple itself. The serpent had not disappeared. It had coiled inward, deep into the bones of the city, waiting to be rediscovered. And with each excavation, uncovered jawbone or golden ornament, we draw a little closer to its message, one carved not in language but stone. Sacrifice and shadow. Modern science has given us X-rays, drones, and ground-penetrating radar. But even with all our tools, one truth remains. The temple still keeps secrets. Today, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent stands as a haunting monument, not just to a civilization long gone, but to a way of thinking that merged power, cosmos, and death into one unbreakable system. Tourists snap photos. Children run past the stone serpent heads. But the ground beneath their feet is soaked in 1,000 untold stories and over 200 known human sacrifices. And still the temple endures. Its legacy is not just architectural, it is psychological, spiritual, cultural. The feathered serpent, this paradoxical god of sky and earth, continued to evolve, He would be adopted by the Toltecs, then reborn by Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl, where his myth took on a gentler tone, the bringer of knowledge, the god who wept for humanity, the one who vowed to return. This reimagining of the serpent god shows how myths do not die. They transform. Even in modern Mexico, echoes of the feathered serpent persist in art, in murals, in literature, and national identity. The temple's image has appeared on coins, stumps, and even government buildings. It has become a symbol of mystery, pre-Columbian brilliance, and of the untamed spiritual world that once pulsed through Mesoamerica. But there is another legacy, one less visible, more uncomfortable. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent forces us to confront the price of belief. It asks hard questions. How far will humans go to feel connected to the divine? What happens when power and religion become indistinguishable? Can beauty coexist with terror in many ways? The temple is not just a historical site. It is a mirror, a reflection of us, our fascination with life after death, our hunger for meaning, our capacity to build monuments of staggering beauty and to stain them with blood. The temple teaches us that greatness comes with shadows, that civilizations can soar to impossible heights while burying their secrets beneath the stones. And maybe that is why we keep returning, not just to visit, but to understand, because deep down we know the serpent is still watching, not to strike, but to remind us of what we once were and what we still might be. Before we spoke in words, we spoke rhythm, tens of thousands of years ago, long before the invention of writing, even before the birth of language itself. Early humans began to create something that could only be described as sound with intention, not speech, not melody, but rhythm. A hand slapping hollow bark, a stick tapping stone, foot stomping earth in time. Somewhere, in that ancient repetition, something magical emerged. The first drum beat. It was not called music. It was not anything. But it felt like something like communication, like movement, emotion taking form. Anthropologists have uncovered evidence of primitive percussion instruments dating back over 30,000 years. These were likely made from natural materials, tree trunks, hollowed out gourds, stretched animal hides. Nothing fancy, nothing preserved. But these rudimentary drums were not toys or idle distractions. They served real purposes: to warn, to summon, to connect. Imagine a tribe scattered across a dense forest. One beat from a distant drum and others knew danger was coming, or a celebration had begun, or the gods were listening. The earliest drums were not just tools. They were extensions of the human body. A heartbeat externalized, a pulse that could be felt across a valley. Drumming was not something you watched or listened to. It was something you participated in together, around fires, under stars, in caves, where echoes made the air itself vibrate. These ancient rhythms became a language of emotion, joy, grief, warning, I hope, all expressed not in syllables or symbols, but in patterned sound. Before the first flutes were carved, before string instruments were dreamed of, the drum was already alive, anchoring us in time, giving shape to ritual, and uniting individuals into tribes. In that way, the drum became humanity's first instrument, and perhaps its first form of collective identity. No matter where on earth people lived, they created something to strike, something to beat, something to mark the moment. Because even when we had no words, We had rhythm, and that rhythm was everything. In the cradle of early human civilization, drums were not just instruments. They were sacred voices. Every tribe, every culture, every corner of the earth developed its own rhythm. But the purpose was nearly universal: to commune with the unseen. In Africa, where some of the world's earliest drums emerged, the rhythm was deeply intertwined with life, death, and ancestry. The djembe, carved from a single tree and wrapped in goatskin, was believed to contain three spirits: that of the tree it was carved from, the animal whose skin gave it voice, and the craftsman who brought it to life. Played in circles, the djembe did not just accompany rituals. It was the ritual. Then there were talking drums, capable of mimicking human speech through pitch and tone. In West Africa, these drums carried message across miles, relaying news, warnings, births, and deaths from one village to the next. Long before the telephone, humans were already drumming their messages through the landscape, across the oceans. Native American tribes treated the drum as a living entity. It was the heartbeat of Mother Earth, played in ceremonies to honor ancestors, summon healing, or guide the souls of the dead. The large powwow drum, played by a circle of drummers, was both a musical and spiritual engine, a communal pulse that aligned humans with nature and spirit. In Australia, the Aboriginal people used clapsticks and percussive stomps in the sacred Dreamtime, a mythic era of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans struck frame drums to enter trance states, seeking visions or communicating with spirits during long, dark winters. These were not performances. These were acts of survival, healing, storytelling, and connection. To drum was to remember. To drum was to belong. And always, it was communal. Drums brought people together into sacred circles, synchronizing hearts and intentions. No sheet music, no stage, just bodies moving, hands striking, souls stirring, all unified by rhythm. It did not matter where on earth you stood. If you heard a drum in the distance, you knew something sacred was happening, something that words alone could never express. From sacred circles to bloody battlefields, the drum has always spoken, sometimes with comfort and sometimes with command. As human societies evolved into kingdoms and empires, drums transformed into tools of domination, instruments of order, and weapons of fear. The earliest armies did not have radios or megaphones. They had drums. In ancient China, massive drums, called bo, were struck to coordinate troops across vast terrains. With a single, resonant boom, commanders could signal a charge, retreat, or flanking maneuver. These drums were not just loud, they were strategic. Each rhythm meant something specific, and trained soldiers knew how to listen, even through the chaos of battle. In Mesopotamia, temple drums were used to announce rulers and summon the public, but in times of conflict, they echoed through city walls, terrifying enemies with a deep, relentless thunder. It was not just percussion, it was psychological warfare. When the Romans marched, they brought with them the tympanum, a frame drum used in processions and by cults like that of Cybele, though not a battlefield instrument in the way horns and standards were. It carried symbolic power, a sound of empire, disciplina, and order. But no army wielded drums quite like the Ottomans. Their meta bands, the world's first known military orchestras, unleashed an overwhelming storm of drums, cymbals, and horns before battles. The relentless pounding of kos, giant kettle drums, and davul, double-headed bass drums, struck terror into the hearts of enemy forces. Some European accounts describe soldiers freezing in panic before even seeing the Ottomans, paralyzed by sound. Drums also enforced power off the battlefield, in royal courts across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Drum ensembles announced arrivals, marked coronations, and underscored political rituals. To beat a drum was to declare, power is present. Even enslaved people in the Americas used drums as tools of resistance. On plantations, rhythmic communication kept culture alive and helped orchestrate secret rebellions. The drum, även under oppression, refused to be silenced. So whether it signaled divine right, military discipline, or rough fear, the drum has always carried a message. This is who rules, who marches, and this is the rhythm of power. As civilizations branched out across continents, so too did their rhythms, evolving in form, purpose, and philosophy. In the East, drums became tools of precision, spirituality, and ceremony. In the West, they leaned into military power and eventually orchestral grandeur. Two worlds, two paths, one heartbeat. In India, the drum became a sacred instrument of divine language. The tabla, with its crisp tones and fluid grace, was used in classical music and devotional performances, but it was more than accompaniment. It was conversation. Each stroke had a name, meaning, a syllabic identity. Indian drumming was not just percussive. It was spoken poetry trained over decades. The tabla player was not just a musician. He was a linguist of rhythm. In Japan, the taiko drum emerged as a ceremonial giant, played in Shinto rituals, theater, and war. Taiko required not just technical skill, but physical discipline. The drummers moved with martial precision, their stances grounded like warriors. In festivals, the booming taiko echoed through mountain valleys, believed to drive away evil spirits and call the gods down to earth. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, the kendang drum led the hypnotic flows of gamelan orchestras, guiding dancers and musicians in sacred temple ceremonies. These rhythms were layered, interlocked, and celestial, a sonic reflection of cosmic harmony. Across the world, in Europe, drums had a different story. They were largely utilitarian during the medieval period, signaling soldiers, marking time, enforcing discipline. It was not until the Renaissance and Baroque eras that drums began to enter formal music. Even then, they were kept in the background, tonally thundering beneath royal fanfare or echoing in grand cathedrals. In this divergence, you see two philosophies. The East saw rhythm as art and spirit, something tied to breath, chant, and meditation. The West saw it as structure and force, a tool to rally, march, and measure. But both understood the drum's core power, to shape time, to dictate pace, to elevate ritual, to connect humans in ways that transcend language, East or West, sacred or strategic. The drum remained central, always listening, always speaking, from mountaintop temples to jungle clearings, from desert fires to candle-lit cathedrals. Drums have always had a place where the human meets the divine. Long before organized religion took root, rhythm was already a sacred language, a way to pray, summon, transcend. In Africa, drums were not just instruments, they were spiritual beings. In Yoruba traditions, for example, the bata drum was used to communicate with the orishas, gods, and ancestral spirits. Drummers were not performers, they were priests. The rhythms they played were encoded prayers inviting the gods to descend and dance among the living. Each pattern had a purpose, each beat a direction. In Hinduism, the drum appears even in the hands of gods. The deity Shiva, in his form as Nataraja, dances the cosmic dance of creation and destruction with a small hourglass-shaped drum in hand. The damaru, its beat represents the pulse of the universe itself, from silence to sound, from void to form. The drum is a divine heartbeat. In Buddhism, the ritual frame drum is used in monastic chants and meditation ceremonies. Its slow, soft strikes guide breath and awareness, acting like a metronome for the soul. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It simply reminds the practitioner to return again and again to the present moment. Across the Americas, indigenous tribes use drums in vision quests, sweat lodges, and healing ceremonies. The beat is constant, steady, mimicking the rhythm of the womb, helping participants enter trance states or connect with ancestral spirits. In these spaces, the drum does not just accompany prayer, it is the prayer. Even within Christianity, where rhythm was often subdued, the drum still found a sacred role. In gospel traditions, particularly in African American churches, drums became a means of praise and power, a heartbeat behind voices lifted in devotion, a reminder of struggle, a hope, and divine rhythm in every life. No matter the faith, the ritual, or God invoked, the drum has been there, not as decoration, but as a vessel for energy, intention, and the mysteries we cannot speak, because when words fail in worship, rhythm remains, and the divine always listens.